Why did Hollywood turn its back on Brendan Fraser, a man who once embodied the very spirit of the big-screen adventure hero? In the late 1992 and early 2002, he was everywhere, swinging through jungle vines, cracking jokes with a wink, and anchoring a billion-dollar franchise that filled theaters around the world. Then, almost as quickly as his star had risen, he seemed to vanish. Fans whispered theories. Industry gossip hardened into myth. But the real story is more complicated and far more human than the rumors ever admitted. Off camera, the toll of years of stunt work left Fraser with a body in repair. Surgeries, pain, and a growing sense that the roles he carried so easily were exacting a price he could no longer ignore. In 2018, he spoke publicly about an encounter years earlier with HFPA executive Philip Burke, an incident he said left him traumatized and contributed to his retreat from the spotlight. The organization's response, and Fraser's principled refusal to participate in its gala circuit, raised an uncomfortable question. Had Hollywood quietly sidelined one of its most bankable leading men? And yet, just when the narrative seemed set in stone, something unexpected happened. Audiences rediscovered him. Filmmakers took notice. The so-called Renaissance gathered momentum online and off, culminating in a fearless performance in Darren Aronofsky's The Whale and the kind of cathartic, tear-streaked standing ovations that only arrive when an artist meets a role at precisely the right moment. In March 2023, Brendan Fraser stood on the Academy Awards stage, an Oscar in his hands, and reminded the world that comebacks aren't accidents. They are choices, fought for in private, long before they are celebrated in public. But how did it all begin, and what exactly pushed a box office king to the margins before the tide turned? Brendan Fraser's name once carried the easy weight of Hollywood charm. He was the kind of actor who could leap between slapstick comedy and sweeping adventure, a performer whose natural warmth made audiences believe in both the absurdity of a man raised by apes and the peril of battling ancient curses in the Egyptian desert. For a moment, he represented something rare in the industry, a leading man who wasn't just physically imposing, but profoundly likable. The late 1992 were an era hungry for escapism. Audiences flocked to high-concept adventure films, and Fraser was at the center of that storm. George of the Jungle turned him into a household name, but it was The Mummy in 1999 that cemented his status. That film not only launched a successful franchise but positioned Fraser as Hollywood's next great action-adventure star, a torch once carried by Harrison Ford in Indiana Jones. But the fascination with Fraser was never just about the box office. Critics and fans alike sensed a vulnerability beneath his broad grin, a willingness to play roles with heart instead of arrogance. That quality, combined with his physical commitment to his performances, made him both accessible and aspirational. He was the everyman who could be a hero. And yet, Hollywood has always had a complicated relationship with its stars. The same system that lifts someone to global fame can just as quickly discard them when their image no longer fits the mold. Fraser's disappearance became one of the industry's quiet mysteries. Unlike stars who flamed out in public scandals, his retreat was less visible, but no less dramatic, leaving behind questions that fans carried for years. Today, his story matters not only because of the highs and lows, but because it reveals the machinery of an industry that prizes spectacle, while often neglecting the people who create it. Brendan Fraser's journey is more than just the tale of one actor. It's a reflection of how Hollywood treats vulnerability, resilience, and ultimately, redemption. To understand how he climbed so high, and why his fall was so devastating, we need to go back to the beginning, his unlikely rise to fame. Brendan Fraser's story begins far from the flashing lights of Los Angeles. Born in Indianapolis in 1968 to Canadian parents, he spent much of his childhood moving from place to place, as his father's work in foreign service relocated the family across the US, Europe, and even parts of Asia. This nomadic upbringing meant Brendan rarely stayed in one school for long, but it also exposed him to diverse cultures and experiences that would later inform his craft. By the time he reached college at Cornish College of the Arts in Seattle, he knew that acting was not just a dream but a calling. His earliest roles came in small television spots and low-budget films, but almost immediately casting directors noticed something different, a mix of physical presence and boyish sincerity. In 1992, Fraser landed his first leading role in Encino Man, playing a thought-out caveman trying to navigate modern California. The film was goofy, broad, and hardly Oscar material, but it was a box office hit, and it made Fraser's face instantly recognizable. More importantly, it proved he could carry a film and connect with audiences through sheer charisma. That same year, he took a dramatic turn in School Ties, playing a Jewish student confronting anti-Semitism at a prestigious prep school. It was a striking contrast to his comedic debut, showcasing a range that critics found promising. The dual success of 1992 slapstick comedy and heavy drama set the tone for Fraser's career. He would not be pigeonholed. The mid-1992 brought steady work and growing visibility. In Airheads, 1994, he fronted a ragtag rock band trying to get airplay by hijacking a radio station. The movie flopped commercially but became a cult favorite, further embedding Fraser into the pop culture landscape. Each project revealed a different facet of his talent, but none prepared audiences for what came next. In 1997, George of the Jungle transformed Fraser into a full-blown star. The Disney comedy, with Fraser swinging through trees in little more than a loincloth, could easily have been ridiculous. Instead, his unselfconscious performance, equal parts athletic, charming, and endearingly goofy, made the film a runaway success. Children adored him, parents found him appealing, and Hollywood realized it had a bankable leading man who could sell tickets across demographics. Just 2 years later, Fraser would make the leap from family comedy to global blockbuster with The Mummy, 1999. Cast as Rick O'Connell, a wisecracking adventurer battling resurrected pharaohs, Fraser embodied a modern Indiana Jones. The film grossed over $400 million worldwide, spawning sequels and making him one of the most sought-after stars of the early 2000s. His ability to blend action, humor, and heart turned him into a staple of adventure cinema at a time when the genre was struggling to reinvent itself. By the turn of the millennium, Brendan Fraser had climbed to a place few actors ever reach, a household name, a box office draw, and a symbol of Hollywood escapism. But stardom has a way of demanding more than it gives. Behind the scenes, the physical demands of his roles and the expectations of constant success were beginning to leave their mark. By the late 1992 and early 2000, Brendan Fraser had become one of Hollywood's most reliable stars. His breakout with George of the Jungle and his box office triumph in The Mummy had established him not only as a charismatic leading man, but also as a versatile actor who could balance humor, romance, and action. At a time when the industry was searching for a successor to Harrison Ford's Indiana Jones, Fraser seemed to embody the perfect blend of rugged adventurer and approachable everyman. It was The Mummy in 1999 that defined his peak. As Rick O'Connell, he fought off undead warriors with wit, charm, and an air of reckless bravery that audiences adored. The chemistry between Fraser and co-star Rachel Weisz made the story more than just spectacle. It was emotional, romantic, and fun. The film grossed over $400 million worldwide, a massive success that instantly turned Fraser into a global superstar. The sequels only solidified his reign, with The Mummy Returns in 2001 pulling in even bigger numbers and placing him at the center of a franchise that studios relied on. Even when critics turned against later entries like The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor in 2008, Fraser's name alone still had the power to carry a tentpole release. But Fraser never wanted to be typecast. Even as he was conquering the box office, he sought out roles that showed a different side of his craft. In Gods and Monsters, 1998, released just before The Mummy, he shared the screen with Ian McKellen in a poignant story about the last days of director James Whale. Fraser's subtle, compassionate performance earned praise and revealed a depth that casual fans may not have expected. Other projects like Blast from the Past, 1999, Bedazzled, 2000, and Journey to the Center of the Earth, 2008, highlighted his comedic instincts and his appeal to family audiences, proving he was more than just an action hero. What audiences didn't see was the toll this career was taking. Fraser was known for throwing himself into his work, performing his own stunts, enduring punishing physical demands, and constantly pushing his body to its limits. While this commitment made his characters feel authentic, it left him battered. Over time, the injuries piled up. Back surgeries, procedures on his vocal cords, and even a partial knee replacement. By the early 2000s, he was spending as much time in recovery as he was on film sets. At the height of his fame, Brendan Fraser seemed unstoppable. His films crossed genres, his name resonated across generations, and his charm gave him staying power in an industry that quickly burns through stars. Yet beneath the surface, cracks were beginning to show. The relentless demands of being a leading man, combined with the physical price of his craft, were setting the stage for a downfall few could have predicted. As Brendan Fraser's career soared, the weight of his choices was already pulling him down. The very commitment that had made him a beloved action hero was also dismantling his body. Years of stunt work left him with a list of injuries, so long it sounded more like a medical chart than a resume. Compressed spinal pads, torn ligaments, a partial knee replacement, and repeated surgeries on his back and vocal cords. Each procedure required months of recovery, yet Fraser kept pushing, determined not to let audiences see the cracks. But the damage accumulated, and slowly his physical limitations made it harder to accept the kind of adventurous roles that had defined him. At the same time, his personal life was unraveling. In 2007, he divorced actress Afton Smith, with whom he had 3 sons. The separation was public and bitter, and Fraser was ordered to pay substantial alimony and child support. When his health issues reduced his ability to work, he sought to have the payments adjusted, sparking headlines that painted him as a fading star struggling with finances. For a man once celebrated as Hollywood's everyman hero, it was a humiliating turn. Yet the most devastating blow came from outside his personal or physical struggles. In 2018, Fraser revealed that in 2003 he had been groped by Philip Burke, the former president of the Hollywood Foreign Press Association. The incident, he said, left him shaken and led him into a spiral of depression. Although Burke denied any wrongdoing, Fraser believed the fallout quietly damaged his career. He claimed he was rarely invited to the Golden Globes, and that his refusal to publicly smooth things over marked him as difficult. In an industry built on relationships and appearances, this alleged blacklisting was a silent but powerful force pushing him to the margins. The combined weight of physical pain, personal loss, and professional alienation was crushing. By the early 2010s, Brendan Fraser had all but disappeared from Hollywood's radar. The man who once headlined billion-dollar franchises was now absent from red carpets, missing from marquee films, and reduced to minor roles in television shows and low-budget features. Fans who had grown up with him began asking a painful question: what happened to Brendan Fraser? Behind the scenes, he was grappling with depression. The joy and openness that once defined him had given way to a guarded sadness. He described himself as retreating from the world, unsure if Hollywood had space for him anymore, unsure if his body and spirit could survive another round of scrutiny. The silence around his absence only deepened the mystery, with many assuming he had simply burned out or walked away. Few knew the depth of the struggles he was fighting just to stay afloat. Hollywood, of course, moved on. A new generation of stars emerged, franchises shifted, and Fraser's absence was rarely noted by the industry that had once courted him so heavily. For over a decade, it seemed his story had ended not with scandalous implosion, but with a quiet, tragic fade. But sometimes the most compelling comebacks are born in silence. Just when it seemed Brendan Fraser had been forgotten, a groundswell of support began to build. Online communities, nostalgic for the warmth he once brought to the screen, started calling it the Renaissance. Filmmakers began to look again at what he could bring to a role not as an action hero, but as a seasoned actor carrying scars and wisdom. And in that unexpected second act lay the seeds of redemption. When Brendan Fraser finally stepped back into the spotlight, it wasn't with the swagger of an action hero, but with the quiet resilience of a man who had weathered storms most of Hollywood would rather ignore. His return was not immediate or flashy. It began with smaller roles in television, such as appearances in The Affair and Trust, where his performances hinted at depths audiences had not seen before. Slowly, the industry started to remember what it had lost: an actor capable not just of entertainment, but of profound empathy. The turning point came with Darren Aronofsky's The Whale in 2022. Cast as Charlie, a reclusive and morbidly obese English teacher struggling to reconnect with his estranged daughter, Fraser delivered a performance that was raw, vulnerable, and devastatingly human. It was a role that required him to set aside the physical ideals of his early career and instead embody fragility and pain qualities he understood all too well. The film premiered to thunderous standing ovations at Venice and Toronto, where audiences wept alongside him. The moment he broke down in tears on stage as the crowd cheered was more than just applause for a performance. It was a catharsis for years of absence and hardship. In March 2023, Fraser won the Academy Award for Best Actor. Holding the golden statue, his voice cracked as he thanked those who had believed in him during the darkest years. It wasn't just a victory for a single film, but the crowning moment of what fans had come to call the Renaissance. For many, his comeback embodied hope. Proof that even after being sidelined, broken, or written off, resilience could carve a path back to triumph. Today, Brendan Fraser's legacy is not defined solely by The Mummy or by his years of disappearance, but by the totality of his journey. He is remembered as the affable adventurer of his youth, the wounded soul who faced Hollywood's indifference, and the artist who reclaimed his place with one of the most moving performances of his generation. His story resonates because it mirrors the struggles of ordinary people, those who fall, who suffer, and who rise again not by erasing their scars, but by embracing them. So the question lingers. When we look back on Brendan Fraser's life and career, will we remember him for the roles that once made him larger than life, or for the comeback that reminded us he was human all along?